we find comfort in the known. We explain things to ourselves because we feel comfortable in knowing the explanation, but we don't know the thing. And in order to know the thing, we have to give up the explanation and really just relax the explanation and see what's really there. Language can definitely fail us when we're trying to explain this aspect of it.
Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I have a really special guest, my good friend Eshwar, who grew up in the Caribbean, has gone through a few struggles in his life, including addiction, and ultimately found his way to a profound awakening. We're going to talk about what it's really like to go through the darkness and come out transformed, not in some abstract way, but in real lived experience. So if you're someone who's struggling, feeling stuck, or just looking for deeper meaning, this conversation is for you. Eshwar, thank you so much for being here, man.
Thank you for having me.
You have a big story to share because I've heard pieces of it before. Let's start at the beginning. What was life like growing up?
Well, Eric, thank you for having me. As a wee little laddie, life was peachy and hunky-dory.
When you were growing up on the Emerald Island of Ireland?
Yes, with, jewels and the streets paved with gold and whatnot.
You're Black Irish, right? Is that what you're
Yeah,
telling me?
I think so, yes.
You did grow up on an island, though, didn't you? Or is it not an island?
I did. I grew up on in Guyana. It's actually considered part of South America, but it's a group of islands, so it's not directly attached to South America. So it's considered part of the Caribbean islands as well. So, yeah, I mean, I came to the States when I was 9, and there's some pretty heavy stuff that happened between 9 and when I could remember, what life was like, and some pretty dark stuff, sexual abuse stuff when I was a kid, and those things kind of carried over. But life in general, in that part of the world, it's considered a third world country, but growing up, we didn't really think about it that way. It was normal to get up and go with my dad to the pastures and milk the cows, and you have fresh cow milk. We had our own little garden where we lived, and my dad was a rice farmer, and we went to school. So it was, to me, that seemed pretty normal. I think the heavy stuff that happened with me as a kid, it got blocked out by that kid at that time, because it wasn't until these things manifest differently as we get a little older. Mine's went in the way of addiction and some other things that it kind of forces you to stop and then look at all of this stuff. But childhood itself was pretty normal. I mean, we had fun. I have an older brother and a younger sister, and at 9 is when we left and we came here to the States. And coming from a tropical island, and then we came to the States in December of 1990. That's a big change. So
yeah, what was that like? Where in the States did you come, and what did that bring? I would imagine it brought some new struggles along with it.
Yeah, well, we came to New York, and we stayed with my grandfather, and it was a couple of different families that came up. My grandfather's, they had a large family, lots of kids. So at the time when everyone came to the States, we all stayed in the same house in Brooklyn, and everybody kind of stayed there for a little bit. It was like base camp until everybody got themselves situated and moved out. But I think the climate was like the biggest thing. And in the island, on the islands, you're allowed to I mean, we roamed around and did all kinds of crazy stuff. You go get fruits and, you go fishing and stuff. And then here you come in December to this place and you're just indoors and it's cold. You
Yeah.
can't do anything else. So that was a bit of an adjustment.
Yeah. No, no, just like climbing up any old mango tree and getting a snack.
No, no, not at all.
That was one of my favorite things about living in Costa Rica. It's just there were just like mangoes everywhere. It's like, oh, I'm hungry. I think I'll just grab one.
Yeah, we had coconut trees, all kinds of fruits, mangoes, cherries, cashews, um, just all kinds of stuff. And
Yeah.
almost everybody had a garden, so you can walk from like one house to another house, a neighbor's house, and get something to eat. So
Yeah. So, at what point after you got to the States did things start to shift for you and become more difficult?
um when I started going to high school, um kind of growing up was a little, I would say the way to think about it was there wasn't very much con conscious attention and like intent awareness of what was going on. It was more like just going through the motions of going to school, coming back home, doing chores, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
When I went into high school, that's when I started to get a little bit more freedom. And my dad wasn't around for a little while, and I was staying with my aunt and my uncle. And I would stay out late with my friends and stuff, drinking. At that time, smoking weed and just doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But that's when I think when I started to drink, that's when the childhood trauma stuff started to surface, and I didn't recognize it at the time for what it was. Um, I just kind of wanted to be away from it because I didn't know how to deal with it, and I didn't know exactly what it was. So I kept on, I kept on drinking. It didn't get bad like right away. Things really got bad was when it really got bad was I think right before I had gotten married and I was in my late 20s. That's when things were like I would drink, get drunk, and do some pretty gnarly stuff. And then I wanted to stop, but I couldn't stop. And that took me to some pretty dark places. I think there was a few times I tried to take my own life. And
Really?
there were times when like I was sitting in the basement on a toilet with a gun to my head, like quite a few times, drunk. And I don't know why I never pulled the trigger, but it was it, I mean, I wanted to stop, I just didn't know how to stop. And things was getting more and more dark, more and more violent. My actions was becoming that way towards others. And it was always lashing out against people that I loved. And it carried over to when I got married. And afterwards, when I had kids, I would get pretty loud and obnoxious. And I remember one time I could see it. I scared my daughter at the time. I think she was like 2 years old. I, but it wasn't enough for me to like get a jolt to my system to really do something about it. But there was a particular instance that occurred, and the gist of it was my wife looked at me and she said, I never thought that you could hurt our kids, but after last night, there's no doubt in my mind that you would. And she's like, you need to do something. And I didn't know what she was talking about. And as the day progressed, it started to come to me what really went on. Um, but things could have gotten really bad, but it didn't. So I made the phone call. I made a phone call to get into treatment. And I'm I'm guessing they hear that stuff a lot because when I called, I told them, you know, I believe I called like a Thursday, and they said they had a bed. Um, And I said, well, I'll be there Monday. And they were like, nah, you're full of crap. Like, I'm like, listen, man, I have a pretty big work project I need to complete, and then I'll be there Monday. Um, and it was true. There was a job that I was on that I needed to get completed before um, I went out there, and the monies I would have made from that job would facilitate it would take care of all my finances while I was away. So I ended up staying and completing the job. It didn't stop me from going out and drinking though. Um, and the Sunday night, I got into an argument with my wife while I was drunk, and then I called the facility right away. And it's like, I'm on my way up. I was like, I'm in Philadelphia. I'm grabbing an Uber and I'm driving up to Lancaster. So Uber all the way up there. And when I got there, they were like, we would have come and gotten you. I was like, it was good to know. And the
It,
shift really happened when you get inside that place. Like they strip you down, you like stoop down and cough, make sure you're not carrying anything or orifices and that kind of stuff. And when I got my clothes and they put me in the detox, actually before they put me in detox, I was like, all right, I'm here. So let's see what happens. It was like the first time I was in a space that I had no idea what was gonna what was gonna occur. Prior to that, I'm an electrician, and a lot of the stuff I know. Those are skills that I have, and I use those skills to create solutions for problems. And there is only a set amount of ways something can break when it comes to electrical, let's say an outlet. And I know all the ways it's going to break. So I know everything I need to do to troubleshoot and to fix that. When it came with me in that space, I didn't know anything. So it was like, that was to me like the moment of surrender. And that was like, for me, that was the unknown there because there was no way for me to even cast out the projection of what it would look like for me to be in that place.
what was that moment like?
It was like coming up to a wall and not knowing what was on the other side. And the only thing that I could do was to be willing. That was it. It wasn't even to be willing to go through the wall, go under the wall, go over the wall to go see what's on the other side. I just have to be willing. That's all that was required. That's the way it came to me. It was like, you just need to be willing. And I was like, it was like complete acceptance of whatever it is that was going to come.
Mm.
And I had no image in my mind of what that would even look like, whatever it was that was going to come. I had no idea what that looked like because I just didn't know. So,
Was it gradual or kind of all at once?
no, that was, in that moment, that was like all at once. That was just like, boom. And for me, that primed the, I would say the speed in which this occurred from that space into the full blown um, dissolution of self and identity, because I was just so ready to see whatever it was that was going to come, and I was fully open to whatever that was going to look like without me having any expectations. And I didn't have any impositions either, and I didn't know anything about it. And as I started to go through this process, then it was like everything was just being revealed. It's like, you, when they say you're the block to yourself, it's true. We like we can block ourselves with our ideas that we have of what we think this is based on what we have collected from others of what this is supposed to look like, and we go chasing what this is supposed to look like instead of seeing what's actually happening.
So, when you talk about seeing what's actually happening, kind of, what was your first glimpse of awakening? And could you kind of lead me through what it was like to kind of be having these two things happening at the same time? This kind of like was this spiritual awakening coming alongside this, you know, uh, move out of being in such a dark place from addiction and everything that you'd been going through?
The biggest shift early on for me was this anger management therapy thing that we were doing. And the anger management therapist that was going through or was teaching us about it, a lot of it was like one-on-one sessions. But I really didn't give him the time of day until I understood that he was a musician and he went through the addiction process itself. So, and it was interesting. It was once I could relate to him on an experiential level, saying that, he's not talking to me based on what he learned in a book. It's from his direct experience of what this thing actually looks like. Then I started to feel more relaxed and started to open up to him. And this thing of resentment and anger was something that always came up with me. And when I started to see that the resentment itself was something that I was creating, it just kind of dawned on me to just let it go. But there wasn't anything that I could do to let it go. I just needed to see that my my resentments were my own doing. So an example of that would be um like my father-in-law. He did something that I didn't quite like. But instead of having a discussion and a conversation with him, I had this story inside of my head of, well, he wronged me.
Mm.
He didn't take the time to even consider how I felt. Well, how was he going to know that if I didn't take the time to have a discussion with him and a conversation? But I ran with the story inside of my mind. And then every time I would see him, I would have this adverse reaction to him. And meanwhile, he has no idea what's going on. But I'm all, moody and pissy and up inside my head and in my feelings about something that the guy is completely unaware of.
Yeah.
And then when I saw that, well, I'm making up the story. And then I'm having this reaction based on the story. And then I'm superimposing that reaction on a person that has no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
That's when the letting go happened. Once I saw that that's what I was doing, it just it just dropped, and it was like it felt like the weight of the universe was like lifted off of my shoulders. Like that's how much I imposed that heaviness on myself. Once that lifted, like the spiritual stuff or what we refer to as spirituality or the journey itself, just blew right open. It took right off. And
Mm.
the ego is held up, or I held my ego, um, I propped it up on the justification of anger and resentment. Like it fed off of that. It felt powerful from it because it was justified to be right in the way that it's feeling, and then it's reinforcing that feeling with this anger, and then just directing it at any and everything. And
Yeah.
it's just that was the ruling thing in my life. So when the structure of that was seen through, it was like, well, if that's the thing that I'm taking to have all of this meaning was just like my own imagination and my own creation, what else is really out there?
Ooh.
And that's when the curiosity of all of this kind of came rushing in, and all the practices um, of AA is all to see through the concept of self. It's there's steps, and they're all steps to break the idea that we have that we create this sense of self with. At least that's the way it worked for me. But it started to go deeper for me because once I started to see through the concepts of myself, I was like, well, they talk about this thing called defects of character. And I was like, well, why do I want to fix this character? If there are defects and it's of a character and this character is something that's made up, why not go to the root of it? And that's an intuition that came to go to the root of identity itself.
Mm.
So
Yeah, it's funny because people use that word character as if it means like ethicalness, or like as if you either have good character or bad character,
right.
and thinking of it as a character instead of my character is a big shift in the way it's perceived, right?
Yeah.
So going back to that the anger you were talking about and the example with your father-in-law, I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with or have struggled with. What would you say to somebody who heard what you said and said, oh, yeah, that's me, but I still feel it?
Well, the first thing for me was to accept that I felt anger. That's one. The second thing was the reason, well, the reason why I feel angry is because I like it. Because there's this sense of power and entitlement that's there. And it's to accept that you like feeling angry. You, for me, I can see through something if I was putting it at a distance from me and saying that it isn't me. You know what I mean? Like, how am I going to try and address something that I won't even acknowledge that's me? And the anger was me. That was it. So in part, it was like not accepting that aspect of myself, but wanting to fix it by denying that it isn't a thing. It doesn't really work. So when it clicked in my mind that, well, I get angry because I like being angry. Well, why do I like being angry? Because it creates a false sense of power and justification. All right. Well, how do I begin to address this now? Well, I can sit and think about all the times I was angry and try to rectify it there. Seems like a logical thing to do, but for me, it was in the times I was becoming angry. So I was at Home Depot and something I was trying to return. It was a tool or something, and they just wouldn't have it. So I felt like it was unjustified. And I felt the anger starting to come up, like I wanted to lash out at this lady. And as it was coming up, that was a time to acknowledge, pause, take a step back, and actively see my anger. It wasn't after I was done yelling at the lady, then going in my truck and be like, I shouldn't have done that. It isn't, for me, it's not done there. It's done in the moment. So it requires, for me, it required a good bit of effort to recognize it. So understanding how the resentment was formed, that's one thing. Well, great. What do you do with that information? There's an application to it. And for me, I had to apply it in my daily life. So it was, and all the things that, and there's a lot of stuff that would set me off, and but they were all opportunities for me to use that tool to the point
Yeah.
where it's accepted. If something is done out of haste, it's immediately corrected. But the way it was, I would say 10 years ago versus now, I would say there's a 99% reduction in that reactiveness with anger because it's something that comes and it just whisks you away. It's like all your conscious awareness and intention just goes right out the window. It just blinds you. And for me,
Yeah.
it always felt like a wave. So
And I love what you said about the difference between being with it right then in that moment versus going back to your truck. And that, because I think we're all also familiar with the moment of beating ourselves up for what we felt and then said and then did.
Hmm.
And it's a really different thing to be with it in that moment rather than to just think, oh, you know, damn, I did it again. Oh, um, which doesn't ever feel like it's moving toward changing it. It's almost like that cycle. It's like it's like a cycle of self abuse. You
Hmm.
know, I'm going to do this thing that, like, in a sense, abuses me and then apologize to myself for it later.
Yeah. Now when we start, at least for me, when this started to work out, it was, well, I don't have an excuse for this anymore. I can't claim, well, I don't know, or I don't have the means to see, or it happened and there is no way, or there's no self-corrective measure that's in place. So there is no more ignoring it. So it's either something is done about it, or there isn't anything that's done. There is no progress to be made. And I know when we talk about spiritual journeys and all of that stuff, that, on a pathless path and no progress can be made, you're it and all of that stuff. Great. Then why do we do all the things that we do? And we beat ourselves up over it because we really don't understand ourselves. We don't understand what's really happening. We're not seeing things clearly for exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's not to say you become this emotionless, you know, blob that just moves through life. If anything, you become fully engaged because there's a level of understanding when you see it in others that if everyone has the same capacities, the same ability to feel pain, fear, anger, and I had the ability, and I was fortunate enough that all the circumstances led to me to be able to see that within myself. Then I can have compassion when I recognize it in others because I know what it is. I know what it takes to go through it and not necessarily overcome it, but how much it required for me to see that all those things needed to be accepted. So
Yeah.
when I see the struggles in others against it, it's like, okay, there isn't a whole lot of judging that goes on.
When you talk about compassion, um, one thing I noticed in my own journey, and I've seen it in others too, is that uh, that self compassion seems to be really difficult, especially in those moments when we're used to judging ourselves. Um, do you have anything how has that shown up in your life?
Um, initially, when I was looking at meditation, like when we first started to get into it, it required this. You do like meta meditation, which is love and kindness. So you put love and kindness out into the world. Well, how do you do that if you don't put it through yourself first? So it's love and kindness towards yourself, and then out into the world.
Mm.
When I was now going through the AA process and doing all my step work, it required that. And it was a difficult thing to do because it was like, well, I've never done that before. What does that even look like to even love myself? And then, there's stages to this stuff. So it was a bit of a challenge. And to me, it was one of those things where I just had to do it. And then when I started to do it, the my entire perception, felt experience about love and kindness shifted, and it
Mm.
started to change my perception. When it changed my perception, it literally changes the way that I saw the world itself. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's how powerful it is. And it's a turn within ourselves to love ourselves, even when we don't want to, and it automatically turns around and it just flows out from us.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's a really good. That's a really good way of putting it. So now you're starting to find compassion for yourself. You're finding compassion for others. What was this process of letting go of identity like for you? Was it like a flash and it was gone, or was there? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, letting go of identity came in a couple of different forms. It's everything starts for me in day-to-day life. That's where that's because for me that's where it makes the most sense, or at least it has to make the most sense. It's not like I'm gonna sit and think about it and then metaphysically it all appears. That's not how it required work for me. So when this idea came up about um, deconstructing self, it was when we were doing the character work, character defect stuff, and there were the things that became apparent or clear was all these different identity structures that I had. So as I was doing step work, it was about the drunk. It was about the guy that was drinking and caused all of this havoc, and he's seeking all of this help, and then he's got to do all of these amends, and all of those things did occur. But something that kind of dawned on me was, well, that's one aspect of me. What other aspects are there? So when the next thing that came, it was when I was hanging out with my friends, they would call me Los. And as that was said, it was like, well, that's how I am with my friends. Like I acted completely different. I was loud and, obnoxious and out drinking and hanging out and doing all of that stuff. And then it was like, well, what is it when you're a son? So the way I was acting with my friends and all of those ideas that I had about, this personality that was out there, um, was completely different when I am with my mom. Then it was
Right.
like, well, what is it to be a husband and then a dad? And the minute I saw that, it just started rolling with everything. Well, a friend. Well, what does it mean to be me? And things just got silent for a second. I had all these ideas about all of these different roles that I played because they all had governing principles, ways that I act and I behaved. Well, none of those are me because I just started seeing them as just, aspects. They're just identities, personalities. And that's when I was left, well, there was no answer. I didn't know what that was. And that's when things really, I would say, really took off because I couldn't accept a concept or a thought to give me an explanation of what I thought myself to be. So within my mind, it was like, okay, I'm not accepting a thought because that's just another personality that will be created. So what is it that I could take that I find myself in? I couldn't find it in anything external outside of concepts. So I started to go back in my memory. Um,
Mm.
and I was laying on my bed, at this time, I think I was home maybe for a week or so, or maybe I just came out from the recovery house and I was staying back at house in Philadelphia. And, at this time I read some stuff with uh, Ramana Maharshi, Eckhart Tolle, Nisargadatta, Alan Watts, you know, got
The
into some of
greats.
the Buddhist teachings, Theravada, and all of that stuff. When I laid in the bed, I was like, I don't know what any of these people are talking about. I was like, I was like, I just don't know. I don't know what they're saying. I don't know their experience, and what they're describing is what they went through. It's not, it's not my experience. I don't know what it is. So I was like, all right, if I'm going to look at this, what is it that I have? So I have my faculties, my sense perceptions, and this idea that I have of me. Well, all right, I'm not going to accept that idea. Like I said, I lay down in the bed. I was like, all right, what's this all about? I just started going back in my memory. I was like, all right, this is me now. Memory came up. I was like 24. That's when I first came to Philadelphia. Another memory came up. I was like 14 years old when I started high school. Another one came up was 9 when I came into this country. And one came up when I was like 4 or 5, when I was back on the island. I was getting beat to spell the word fruit. I was like, the memory wasn't like super important, but the time frame was. I was like, well, I'm 4 or 5. What was there before that? And this image of the younger version of me at 4 years old at that time came up, like in front of my face, just like this. And it was my 4-year-old face. And the face just turned away from me. And the back was just hollow, empty. It was like the entirety of experience, the entire cosmos. And in an instant, it felt like a rubber band just being pulled, and stretched. I'm like, what's that? What was there before this? Before this memory? I was like, it pulled as far as it could go. It was like my mind pushing against the wall, and then something cut the rubber band, and the entire thing unraveled. Everything. I mean, the entire physical manifestation, the put togetherness of experience, just, and then it started to coalesce. And as it was coalescing, it was showing exactly how this entire thing was formed, the identity itself. There's something that just cannot be spoken about. Then there's a sense, then a sense of, then a sense of me, and the entire manifestation.
Wow. That's a great story. So there was sort of, from your story, it's like there was sort of it almost sounds like a relaxed desperation and a deep curiosity that brought you to that moment. How would you describe it? What was going on for you that got you there?
I wanted to know, but I didn't know what I wanted to know. I wanted to find out, but I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't know what I wanted to find. Even though I heard a little bit about what this is supposed to be and it's supposed to look like, I rejected all of that because those were other people's experiences. And that's what they're talking about. They're only speaking about what it was like for them. And within myself, I just knew that, well, if I go chasing that, I'm chasing their experience. I'm not looking at what's really here. And it was really just kind of going into this completely blinded. And the thing that pushed against the unknown is the known. And the known was everything that I collected to be myself. And when my mind pushed up against something that's prior to it, it had no choice but to give up. And when it did, then, it's interesting because this is where all of the words will fail, because there's this dualistic way that our language is like, okay, there was a me there that went and unraveled all of this. And it isn't that. It's just the error of perception that we care with ourselves. We impose the entire manifestation as being a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's not until we're ready to at least give up the entire unknown, I'm sorry, to give up the entire known, then the unknown becomes available. And the coming back to all of this, because that was a pretty, um, I mean, that was interesting what happened after that. It shifted everything, everything changed. Um, and then it comes around full circle and it shows that nothing changed because this is the unknown. It wasn't anywhere else. It was that dramatic because it was the first time it was experienced. And outside of that, there was no conception of anything that was known because we find comfort in the known. We explain things to ourselves because we feel comfortable in knowing the explanation, but we don't know the thing. And in order to know the thing, we have to give up the explanation and really just relax the explanation and see what's really there.
Yeah.
You know, language can definitely fail us when we're trying to explain this aspect of it. That's why it's always said it's an experiential thing. The Buddha always talks about the wise for themselves, each will experience this for themselves. You know, it's not to be believed and create conceptually this idea of something else to go and look for, but really go and find it, see it, experience it, and then it makes sense.
Well, and of course, that's the whole hero's journey, right? Going into what's actually happening, and instead of just telling the story in our mind of what's happening. And this is, you know, that whole you're not your story thing that a lot of people sort of say as a way of like giving people a sense of a way out of that mind identified sense of self. But in another sense, going deeply into the actuality, the real unfolding of the story is its own pathless path because you can only ever see the step right in front of you. You don't get to know where it's all going.
Yeah, it was
Hey,
for me.
one sec, Eshwar, it's something seems like it's happening with your camera. I think you like maybe this trip into the unmanifest has set your thing. And my fridge actually started running too. I'm just gonna unplug that real quick. When your studio is also your kitchen.
This Insys 360 camera, it has this um, feature where it reads your hand movements, and your hand movements activate different features. So whenever I threw my hands up, it activated the auto tracking feature on it.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. Because for a while there, while you were talking, it's like down this, and I was like, oh, it's kind of fun.
That's the universe. It's like, oh, this is he's affecting time and space. Oh my God.
You know, at first I thought, well, maybe I'll just cut this part out, but no, I'm definitely leaving this. So now everything's blown apart. What you've gone to rehab. What talk a little bit about what the unfolding of this new life was like, is like.
Well, the thing that happened immediately after, like, after this all coalesced back, it was this entire thing isn't. It isn't. It's completely fabricated. This entire experience it isn't real. And well, for me, it was like, well, how do you rectify what's been going on here? So it's like, all right, there's some things definitely that needed to, like all the insights needed to be matured, and the projection outwards of a experienced life as this person that's here interacting with all of this stuff, that's the thing that isn't. And what I experienced in that experience was uh, the entire mind just pausing for a second. And once it paused, experience was experiencing experience. It's the simplest way I can put it. Um, and then it still coalesced back into this guy that's here that's kind of seemed like it's doing stuff, but there was still more stuff to kind of learn. But the thing that dropped away was this need to get and gain things in life. This anything that would prop up an identity structure or an ego structure fell away. So the need that I felt for success and money went. Um, I had something like 1,600 friends on Facebook, and that was a ego prop up thing. Oh, the more friends I have, I didn't know any of these people. They don't know anything about me. You know what I mean? So all of that just got deleted. It was like the things that we prop up self and identity and ego with just started to fall away naturally. Uh, Drinking and hanging out with friends and all of those things just dropped. And the things that really revealed themselves were the things that I genuinely um, the core things that the identity was propped up with, which was family and my kids. So those were the things that I started to focus on and put time and energy into. Just because I saw through this stuff doesn't mean that they did. And I can say, well, I'll just leave. Well, none of this matters anymore, and I could just be out there. But that would kind of create more harm towards the ones that depend on me, like my family. So I went on to do the same things I was doing with work, just a lot lighter. There wasn't this hold on to any of this stuff. Uh,
Mm.
the next thing there was a pretty big shift was this idea of time, of past and future. Nothing ever gets created from a past that's going to give you a future. There's only now. There's only what's occurring right here. A past can only be created from this moment, and a future can only be projected from this moment. So it was like all these stories I used to tell about myself about all these things that happened. They, 99% of them just lost meaning and fell away. And all of the future projection stuff they just don't happen anymore. Yeah, you can make plans about what you may want to do, but there's no, you're not holding on to the outcome of those plans. If they happen, they happen. If they don't, they don't. It is what it is,
Yeah.
kind of deal. It's not that I don't care, is I don't care to hold on to it. I don't care for it to really be a thing. Yes, there's importance to some things, but um,
This is a good point. It's kind of like the difference between um, going, well, nothing's real. I'm not real. You're not real. So, whatever. Versus the the how do you put it? The knowing, the felt sense almost of the insight of it. Um, that there is how would you put it? The difference between that, what there is nothing and no one and nowhere, and versus what the actual experience is for somebody who's kind of hears this and goes, I I don't get that. Like, I could maybe just say, and you see people just say it, like,
mhm.
oh, I read it in a book somewhere, so I'm going to say that now, and then that's that.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like throwing out the baby with the bathwater because
oh yeah,
there's a lack of maturing of the insights because this entire thing is the delusion of the individual themselves. So the individual dials back and dives into their own delusion and tries to see it as what it is. Um, and that's where the understanding comes to. Uh, and it isn't something to throw and cast back out and then everyone else. Okay, the mind expands into the expansive awareness of your felt experience right now. So everything that one can experience would be a projection of, let's say, their own mind. Great. So the individuals that you come in contact with, you're creating this idea of them. They're never the actual person. But it's not saying the other person doesn't exist. Is your idea of them, is your idea that you created of them. And that's how we kind of go about in this world, and we all share in that and interact with it, and we all intertwine and interconnect to the point that we don't recognize that anymore.
That's really
You
good
know,
way of putting it.
we get a chance to see it. And if the insights aren't matured, then uh, there's a judgment that occurs that you're seeing incorrectly, or you don't matter. It isn't that. It's always directed back at the one that's casting out.
Mm.
So we we remain in a position of always open and seeing without really judging. Because any judgment we're going to make would be a judgment against our own projection outwards. So it's a judgment that we're making towards ourselves.
Is there anything uh, that that you feel helped in maturing insight?
Let's not take a position on any of the experiences that occurred, because there were experiences. And if I was going to take a position, say, on the experience of no mind, or when mind blown apart, then I would be seeking that experience and looking to replicate it. But the reality of what's happening, I'm looking to replicate an idea of something that already happened. So I'm looking to replicate an idea. So the mind is good at generating things that it knows. But when it gets blown apart, it's like, well, stay in that open position. And that's a little bit more difficult to do, because we want to run to comfortability, which is an explanation of what those experiences were like. So it's a difficult thing to just shut up.
Well, and you've also, right, I know in my own case, you've got this seeker who now uh, uh, has this moment of like, oh, wow, something definitely changed.
Mhm.
And in that moment, there's this insight, and there can be bliss and all kinds of experiences. But then afterward, there still is like life. You're still the
Mhm.
actual person who was the seeker. Yet something has changed, but the mind isn't like gone, and it kind of wants to come back and do its thing and be like, oh wait, we got something. We found the thing we were looking for. You know,
Mhm.
and that I think that can be, it can things can kind of start to feel worse before they feel better, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yeah. For me, it was always the thing that dawned always was never to accept any experience, because it didn't matter how great and grand it was, or how mundane it is. Um, they're all, for me, the way I saw them was just, they're all delusions. So to just chill out, relax, and relax into this, and it's always available and always accessible. And any step towards chasing and seeking an experience is a movement into like a form of delusion. It's a movement into this mind thing that will generate all these experiences. And it's been the my experience speaking from that, it can generate all kinds of stuff, all types of dimensions. It can, sit in meditations, and all kinds of stuff can occur. But those things, when they happen, is not to discourage anybody from going through that. They do open the mind, the stagnant thing of, I'm this person that's experiencing this life as, well, I'm going to work and doing this and this, monotonous kind of thing. It it blows those ideas apart when the mind becomes expansive, and it's not limited by just this one subjective type of reality that I've known for 30 something years. but it has a capacity to do so much more. Well, what do you do with that? Do you go and you explore infinitely? You can. For me, it was enough. And I was like, I don't need all of that. So it's like, um, there's a stepping back and a relaxing into this where there is no wanting to really know anything, but everything is perfectly perfect unfolding in its infinite perfection. Um, and the relaxing into it is the relaxing of the sense of division and separation. And that's when, this is like an effortless thing. So it wasn't like effort required to go into it. It's actually a relaxing of all of these processes that we've had, this identity, the ego. So the anatta, no self, isn't, there isn't a self. It's what is when we start to crack open this concept that we have of self. What happens when that relaxes? What remains is what we discover, and that's what there isn't much that can be said about it.
Yeah.
And it's different for everyone. It could be the same, I don't know, but um, everybody have their own set of circumstances and collection of ideas and thoughts and experiences that lead them to this space. So generally, it uses that to show you through yourself. So it's unique in that way. And not to quote the Buddha or any of that stuff, not that I know what he says, but for every sentient being that's here on this planet, um, the path is unique to each one of them. So it's wise for each one of them to see for themselves or not.
One of the things I've learned from you over our friendship is to be where you are. What's this? What's this right now? And not be afraid to go into that. So if in this moment there's the perception or the experience of something, to just to look at that. What is this? What is this? Does it feel like demons? Just having an awakening isn't going to mean that all of a sudden you might not still be in an abusive situation in your life, and that there may be situational things that need to change, and that you are going to have to, make a decision about in life. And but that isn't different. That that's where the difference, I think, between, in my own life anyway, between this sense of knowing versus like looking to a doctrine or a dogma or knowledge, insight maybe versus knowledge, is that, so well, it doesn't matter if I'm being abused because there is no me and there is no them. You could really like, that can go to a very dark, weird place, versus going, okay, experience right now seems to be this. What is this? And bringing that curiosity to it. So in as your own awakening has unfolded, what does like spirituality and absolute versus relative and all that stuff kind of mean to you now?
It's one and the same. The unknown is right in front of our face. It's what thoughts, ideas, and concepts have always been explaining, but we took the explanation to mean the thing that's being explained instead of putting away the explanation and seeing and experiencing. So that's the entire process. Well, it isn't spiritual anymore, and that's when we can say that it becomes spiritual. Mountains become mountains, rivers become rivers. Um, it's we just start to see life as life is instead of life as we interpret it. So this heaviness of living kind of it just kind of relaxes. It doesn't mean that heavy things don't happen. Through um the spirituality process or awakening process or whatever you want to call it, you know, my nephew passed, and he's 7 years old. Um, he died from cancer in 11 days, stage 1 to stage 4, and 11 days he passed. So well, how do you deal with that? You know what I mean? So it was sitting and feeling that fully for what it is, and experiencing exactly what was happened. Whatever the emotions were that came, they came. Um, but nothing was really held on to. So I've dealt with my grandfather passing away and all of that stuff. So life still happens and things still, continue on. But would I sit and wallow and sad for many, 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 many months and years? Things happen, they occur, they shift. It's not, the mind doesn't hold on to those things anymore.
If you could go back to your younger self at your lowest point and whisper one thing, is there one thing you would whisper to that self?
I wouldn't say anything.
You wouldn't say anything.
Mm-mm. Because this was the outcome and the culmination of all of those experiences up until the point that I realized that this is all that there is. This now, this present. So it wasn't that those culminated into it, but if I said anything at that point, it could shift the possibility that this would have been the outcome. Do I know that? I don't know. But I wouldn't change a single thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, for somebody else, maybe who's in a dark place right now and watching this, what would you say is the simplest thing to do um, to start moving if somebody feels stuck?
This is to be okay with that. It's okay to be stuck. Um, it's also okay to to relax. It's okay to step away from it for a little bit. There are things that are causing any kind of pain and harm. It's okay to move away from it. When it comes to the spiritual path or looking, searching, and seeking, it's it's in the times that we say, "All right, I'm gonna put this down for a little bit." That the most gains are ever seen is our willingness to just kind of set it all aside. Because when we set it all aside and we turn around, it's a life that we see. And
Yeah.
all the practices only ever show you life. It only ever shows you this.
Yeah.
It only ever shows you what's occurring. Stop and smell the roses. Go outside for a walk. Look around. Immerse yourself in experience. When we're facing heaviness in life as well, it's okay to talk to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Angela and I were talking about this the other day about how often this can seem like such a solitary pursuit. I am trying to find out who I am,
Mhm.
and that we forget that everyone goes through this in one way or another, and that we are humans, and we're social animals. And part of who we are is that shared experience and community, and being able to, um, to be there for each other and have people be there for us.
Yeah. The work, the work has to be done by the individual, but you don't need to walk the path alone. There's a lot of people that can offer guidance because they've gone through it, but they can point. You're the one that looks and sees. So
Yeah.
it's interesting, and I think why AA worked so well was I used to think that I was alone, like I was the only one that was facing this. I was the only one that, like, why am I this way? And when things like really changed in AA was when my sponsor was like sharing his story, and the things he were talking about, the things that he did were the same exact things that I did. I was like, shit, he's just like me. And just that commonality and the shared experience of that suffering and addiction, um, that'll lay the groundwork for me to actually do the step work and walk the steps. He guided me, but he couldn't make me do my step work. He couldn't make me walk the steps. That's something that I needed to do. But he also did it from a distance too. If he saw me waver and fall, he'll, you know, show a good word. But sometimes it takes somebody who have gone through it to say, well, they can look and see, and they're like, all right, I'll let him kind of falter. He'll stumble and he'll find his way. Or, they know when you have enough and they come and they help you up. And I was fortunate for him.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Well, thank you, man. That was that was great. I I learned a lot today, and we've had conversations like this before. But this was really something. I want to thank you for just sharing your experience, for sharing everything you've been through. I know there are a lot of other people that will get something out of this. If people want to get in touch with you or find out more about you, where's a good place for them to do that?
Most anyone can jump on the website. It's sensewithoutmind.com. And then the YouTube channel, Sense Without Mind. I vigorously respond to all the millions of people who follow me and comment on my videos. But I do try to respond to people right away. And on the website, it has my email and stuff. So if anyone want to reach out, they can. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm pretty straightforward. I do let people know that um, I still work. I'm an electrician, so this isn't like I'm not in the glamorous world of spirituality, and I have it all.
Even though you have a guru beard, you have not taken up the guru vocation.
No, this is to keep me warm in the winters over here.
I hear you, man. I
Dude,
hear you.
yeah, my daughter's like, hey, you're gonna shave your beard. I was like, no, it's still cold. So,
It's too cold to shave. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Well,
yeah, sensewithoutmind.com and the YouTube channel. I'm trying now to get back into posting and stuff. So I try to do at least a video a week. So
okay, cool. I will put links down below. And if you're watching this video and it resonated with you, feel free to drop a comment, subscribe. Let me know what stood out to you the most. And if you know somebody who could benefit from this, feel free to share it with them. Eshwar, thank you so much, man. This was just so great. I look forward to speaking with you again. And yeah, thanks for being such a good friend.